to see you all again. It's great to be here. Take a moment and think of your earliest memory of your primary caregivers. Kind of walk back in time for a minute. Was your primary caregiver a mother, a father? Was your primary caregiver a grandmother, auntie or uncle? Who was your primary caregiver as young as you were, the earliest you can remember? I was 3. My older sisters were fighting in the other room. It was stressful, so I walked into the little bedroom we all shared. It's a little house in San Diego, the track homes for World War II veterans, wooden clapboard homes. And there was a ray of sunshine coming through the window, shining on the carpet. And to get away from the stress, I laid down in that sunbeam, closed my eyes. A minute later, I felt somebody come in and lay down next to me. I opened one eye and looked, and it was my very stoic, very serious mother. And she laid down in the sunbeam next to me, took a deep breath, and sighed. And we just laid there in silence for a while. These earliest memories that you have form habits in terms of how we relate to one another. Like my mother was so serious and so stoic that even at 5'8", very slender, she terrified my uncles who were my size. But at the same time, though, we have that experience, very stoic, very severe, mixed with cuddling with her son in a ray of sunshine. So there's certain habits we develop based on the relational styles of our primary caregivers. They're habits you as a child, starting before you can even remember, that you developed on relating to mother figures, to father figures, and that you adapted to their style of relating to you. And so this observation led to what psychologists now call attachment theory. That there are ways that from a very young age we learned to attach to the people around us. The reason why these habits become so powerful as babies is because we're powerless. We are 100% dependent upon the adult figures in our lives, and so therefore we adapt to their style. Now, I'd like to point something out. One of the things I'm going to give you all is a lot of my bias, and I'll try to highlight when you're going to hear my bias. Let me start with one of my biases right now. I actually would argue with our attachment theory colleagues. For those of you that are parents, how many of your children came into the world their own person? That as infants, they were demonstrably different. You could tell the differences between each of them. My oldest, Jotham, he came into the world contemplating, right? Second he was born, he opens up his big blue eyes and just starts thinking about the world. Quiet, rarely cried, slept through the night. He was one of those babies. My Diamolin, my second biological child, she came into the world talking. Like, it never screamed, she just starts babbling right out, just making noises and trying to connect. Locked eyes with me and was trying to talk to me, just right out of the room. My youngest used my poor wife's uterus as a starting block and sprinted out to the point where the doctor barely caught him in time. And he's been running ever since. So one of the things that our colleagues who are attachment theorists tend to assume is that infants are blank slates, that they're just all the same kind of creature, and that they adapt to the parent. I would like to suggest that maybe the parents adapt to the babies too, because all of our children are different. That tendency of mutual adaptation, I adapt to those people closest to me, and they adapt back with me, continues throughout our lives. So what we have is we have very powerful habits starting from the time we're very young in adapting to our parents. Likewise, we carry those habits with us. And they are habits. We have styles of relating. And so our attachment theory colleagues will go, okay, so this is your attachment style. My gentle response to that is, yes, this is an attachment style and this is a tendency, but that doesn't mean that it's absolutely set in stone. That how your attachment style is in this relationship may be a little bit different in a different relationship. There's going to be a lot of similarities, don't get me wrong, but there will also be differences. So where did this theory come from? So glad you asked. Mary Ainsworth. So Mary Ainsworth starts with 3 fundamental assertions. Bonding is an intrinsic human need. Okay, we talked about this the other day, I think, where when we measure the physiological and medical effects of chronic loneliness over time, it's as bad as various other health variables put together. For example, the Harvard study on men, some of you have seen that TED Talk where they talk about what predicts happiness in old age. What they find is that how connected you are in middle age predicts how healthy you will be and how long you will live, more so than blood pressure, cholesterol, et cetera, all of these other things that doctors can measure. The reason why doctors don't talk to you about it is because they can't measure the quality of your relationships. But one of the things they have found again and again and again in doing long-time research, what we call longitudinal research, is that the quality of the relationships you have meets vital needs, and the better these relationships are for you and the people you relate to, the longer you'll live and the happier you will be on average. Bonding is an intrinsic human need. So the second one is regulation of emotion and fear enhances vitality. Okay. I love adventure. Every Friday night for 30 years, I've taken my sweetheart out to a different restaurant. One of the great things about moving to Utah, you have so many restaurants here. For those of you that love food, that you're foodies, I call myself a ghetto foodie because I'm not rich, so I go to the little mom and pop restaurants. You guys have so many of them. I've got our dates planned out to the middle of 2028, and every week I'm getting more suggestions that I add to this long list. But does that mean that every restaurant we go to is going to be an absolute banger? No, some of them are awful. And so we have friends who will be like, hey, can we go on a double date with you? And we're like, sure. And they go, where are we going? And I pull up the list. We're going to go here. And they say, what's the food like? And I say, I have absolutely no idea. It might be awesome. It might be terrible. I don't know. And they go, okay, well, you go try the restaurant first. And then we'll schedule for another night. And you need to vet and just make sure the food there is okay. And then assure us that it is. Like, go into the cave and make sure there's not a dragon in there. And then we'll go into the cave with you later. I'm like, that defeats the adventure. Come, get food poisoning with us. Come on, let's do the thing, right? Okay, maybe I didn't sell it well, but you get where I'm coming from, right? Taking risk, managing that fear is an important part of living vitally into the world. Living into the world where you're engaged and you're willing to try and you're willing to risk, even if you get hurt. And so that kind of regulation of fear is a key survival skill, according to Ainsworth. And so what happens when we raise kids in a fearful world, where they're afraid of things? Well, we'll get to that in a minute. The other is that promoting adaptiveness is important to help people grow. That regulating our emotions can help us adapt to situations. Like, okay, let's go back in the time machine again. So think of your favorite elementary school teacher and think of your least favorite elementary school teacher. Okay, favorite, you're right. Miss Bonica, kindergarten. She was a hippie. We're talking the long hair with the rags, the colorful rags braided in it. She'd bring an acoustic guitar. Half of kindergarten was singing time, and she loved all of us little kids. And so we adapted to Miss Bonica's very affectionate style by being affectionate in return. Least favorite teacher? Yep, Mrs. Harris. She was dour and angry. She hated teaching. She would tell us how much she hated teaching, how much she hated us kids. And so we adapted by being very quiet and as far away from her as we possibly could be. So that kind of adaptiveness to other people predicts our survival. If we behave the same way, regardless of the people we're around, especially as kids and these adults who are in power, there are times, places, and cultures where those kids would just be killed. You know what I mean? And so it's very important for us to adapt to whatever people are in power around us. Now, let's bring an up-to-date example. Think of the best supervisor you've ever had and the worst supervisor you've ever had. How did you adapt to both of them? If you refused to adapt to either, that might have decreased how long you were in that particular job, right? For example, best supervisor I ever had, Beverly Alexander by far. She met with us, she believed in us, she'd build us up. She was very strict and very demanding, but believed in us and would work on the front lines alongside us. There was no task that we would do that she wouldn't do alongside with us. Love her to death. Worse, not gonna use his last name because this might end up on YouTube someday, but Chris. One of my many, many jobs through my adventurous life was selling shoes, Al Bundy style, if any of you are old enough to catch that reference. And so he was a micromanager's micromanager. He would sit in his office, and then he would come out. He wouldn't organize the shoes or clean up. He would critique it, write us up, and then go back into his office. Wouldn't lift a finger to help. And so with Beverly, we adapted by being willing to try, to risk new things, to push, to work hard. With Chris, all of us shut down and did the absolute bare minimum that wouldn't get us written up. Some of you get it. So adaptation, even if unpleasant, predicts our ability to survive, whether it be in a job or in life. So one of the ways Mary decided, Dr. Ainsworth decided to test her theory was on toddlers. You know, it's really fun because one of my areas of expertise is in the psychology of spirituality and religion. And so some people will come and go, oh my gosh, religion's the best thing, or oh my gosh, religion is so toxic. And the ones who believe that religion is toxic, how can you promulgate like some of the health benefits of religion? I'll say, look at my field. My field is an entire field of torturing animals and kids. You know what I mean? If you read the history of psychology, it's pretty dark. And so what Mary Ainsworth did is she took toddlers and their parents, and they would bring them in and sit them down in a room. And there were one-way mirrors around, okay? So they could watch in, but the kids and the parents couldn't see out. Then what they would do is they would ask the parent to leave the toddler alone for a period of time to see how the toddler would respond. So imagine the little kid. They're in this room. They're surrounded by black glass on all sides, right? Pretty scary stuff. And then the parent would come in after a little while, and they would see how would the toddler respond to the return of the parent. Okay, that's where this research started. And then they doubled down. You know how many children, not all, but many children go through a phase of stranger danger where being around, it's interesting for those of us that are parents where our kids went from really friendly and anybody could hold them to terrified of anybody but mom and dad, right? And so Mary selected children of that age. And she doubled down that not only would mom leave the room, but then a stranger would come in. And there's no mom there to protect or hold the baby. How does the baby respond to the stranger? And then how does the baby respond when mom comes back in? And she noticed that there are 4 tendencies that these toddlers developed. Well, then she and other researchers, like Bowlby, for example, who's usually known for, like, he's the father of attachment theory. Between you and me, it was Mary Ainsworth did most of the work. Just let's kind of keep that between us. And so what they would do is they would then do these long-term studies, again, what we call longitudinal studies, over time to see how do these kids turn out as adults. Okay? So what we have is, again, we have 4 general tendencies. So we have secure attachment, and we'll define what that means in a minute. Anxious and preoccupied attachment, dismissive avoidant, and fearful avoidant. Now, again, my big bias. One of the things I've seen is I have seen people who normally have one of these attachment styles, like secure attachment is believed to be the healthiest. And I've known people in my personal life who have a secure attachment style generally, but you get them with the wrong partner and things can get really squirrely really fast. I don't know if you're like me, but let's say I have 2 friends, right? Daniel and Marissa. Daniel, lovely, securely attached, healthy human being. Marissa, securely attached, wonderful human being, both friends of mine. They meet at a barbecue and start dating, and all sorts of toxic hell starts to erupt, right? They've got a severely codependent relationship. They're getting text messages all night. They're calling the police on each other. Eventually, to mercy of all the friend group, they break up. They try to split the group in half. Well, you're either with me or against him or whatever else. And so after years, the dust finally settles down, and they're both back to being lovely people again who have gone on to other healthy partners and done fine. That there's this interesting thing that happens is the people that we partner up with can inadvertently play on our attachment style and exacerbate some of the good things or bad things about our general habits of attaching. That attachment isn't this thing that is necessarily like history is destiny, meaning I had this insecure attachment style, secure attachment style as a baby, and therefore that's the way I'm going to be my whole life. Well, yes, these are just tendencies. These are averages. But you can have these interesting situations where 2 normally healthy people get together and have a very unhealthy relationship. But I've also seen where 2 people who are self-aware of their struggles, who may have one of these less healthy attachment styles, can get together and actually help one another and have beautiful relationships. And so, again, history is not destiny. That who we are around helps predict what attachment styles we exhibit. So We participate in the attachment of one another. We often inform one another's attachment styles and dynamics, usually unintentionally. So, one of the things that is very interesting in my relationship with my sweetheart, she is a truck driver's daughter, okay? Like, her father got her behind the wheel of a big rig when she was 16 and was teaching her how to handle all 26 gears, right? Dad was gone for 5-6 days a week, every week, her entire growing up years. When he was around, he was very intensely engaged, but then he'd be gone again. Mom, effectively a single mom, was very independent, juggling 3 demanding kids, right? So my sweetheart learned to be very independent from a young age. And so I also learned to be very independent from a young age, right? Mom's very stoic, she's very standoffish, and so we have 2 very, very independent people trying to form something called a relationship. How's that gonna work, right? And so it was one where, for early on in our marriage, we realized that if we didn't take time deliberately to spend time with one another, we would never see each other. She'd be doing her life agenda, I'd be doing my life agenda, and unless they cross paths, right? And so we're participating in this attachment style with one another. It's something that we do, and it's often unconscious, but that's what we're doing. We're participating in attachment. And it turns out that healthy attachment requires some concentration and some skill. So again, one of the things I'm going to be a little bit cautious about is we're categorizing one another or ourselves in terms of attachment. Let's be careful with that, because it also depends on who we're around. And so one of the things that's been interesting, and you've probably had this experience, you're talking to a colleague and they've got this very intense relationship with their significant other, but they're the sweetest, mellowest person at work, right? Because we're participating in their attachment style differently at work than they do at home, and their partner is participating differently than we do, okay? So styles also, it's a matter of degree. One of the things that I'd like us to keep in mind is, when does our attachment style need to change? When do we need to work on it? So many, many years ago, about a century ago now, Sigmund Freud was asked, so he's the father of talk therapy, we're talking good old Freud, and he was asked, well, how do we know, given that based on your writings, all of us seem neurotic, all of us seem a little bit mentally ill, how do we know who needs therapy? And he said, it comes down to love and work. Okay, so love is our ability to maintain affectionate relationships with those closest to us. Okay, friends, family, children, significant other. If our style is interfering with that, then it may need modification. Work is our ability to fulfill our life obligations. Okay, work does not just mean employment, it means that, but a 6-year-old is not employed. A 6-year-old has a different set of work tasks than a 26-year-old, than a 46-year-old does. Okay, like a 6-year-old, they need to be able to clean their room to a degree. They need to be able to, go to and from school, things like that, right? Whereas a 46-year-old may have an entire different list of demands. And so love and work. If our style is interfering with either or both of those, then that style may need some attention and some modification. So, secure attachment characteristics. So when Ainsworth is watching some kids, mom would leave the room, okay? The child may exhibit some upset, like they might start to cry, they might sit, crouch down and start to cry and look around and wonder what's going on. And then when mom walks in the room again after a few minutes, the baby walks up to mom and hugs mom and will allow mom to hug and hold the child, okay? And then can sit the child down and the child can go and play with the various little toys in the room. That these children, when you watch these old videos, the children often will look over their shoulders at mom, and it's like mom becomes a secure foundation, like home base. And insofar as they can see mom there, okay, they can go out adventure, they can try new things, they can even engage with a stranger who walks in the room if mom's there. We on the same page here? And so there's a secure relationship between mother and baby. And so in the strange situation where mom leaves the room and the stranger comes in, they may be very cautious around the stranger, kind of keep an eye on the stranger while they're playing. But again, mom walks in the room, baby runs back up to mom and embraces mom, and then mom can interact with the stranger with the baby in arms, okay? So one of the things we find is that people, as they age, who have this kind of secure attachment style, tend to trust others and they tend to trust themselves. Now, this is not conceit or arrogance. Okay, that's an insecure style. Instead, they tend to assume that the people around them do not mean harm and that the people around them are trying their best. So they tend not to take other people as personally. Okay? So for example, let's say we're working together in your unit or in your office, and I'm having a bad day because you're having a bad day, right? So you come in, you're slamming your desk around, everything, you're mad and cussing under your breath, and now I'm upset, and now both of us are slamming and cussing things around, right? That is not a secure attachment style. That means I'm not just assuming the best of you. Oh, you know, Adam's having a bad day. Hey, buddy, you okay? You know, instead he's having a bad, now I'm having a bad day. That's a less secure style. So a secure style would be, I trust that he's doing his best. I may offer to help or ask him what's wrong, but his upset does not make me upset. I don't assume that his upset is about me, okay? So think of your own experience, your own dating life, where you come home from work, you've had a bad day, and your partner is upset that you've had a bad day. Anybody have this experience? Okay, a few of us, where that shows that they are taking your bad day as though it is their fault or their problem. Somebody with a secure attachment style goes, oh, you're having a bad day. Let me know if there's something I can do to help. Do you need a hug? Can I help you with dinner? Right, that's a secure style. So, and again, they tend to trust themselves, that they're willing to try new things. They're willing to take risks. They're willing to take risks in interpersonal relationships. They're willing to take risks with career, not necessarily grand, foolhardy, stupid risks, but instead intentional. I'm going to try this new thing because I think I can do stuff, right? So they're comfortable with simultaneous intimacy and autonomy. One of the things that's interesting in watching people who are securely attached is they tend to have their own life and their own agenda, and they keep connecting. In fact, I was thinking of my little brother and his wife. So they came over and they were cooking dinner at my house the other day. And both of them have their set of tasks, dishes that they're cooking for our shared dinner that evening. And as they're moving together in the kitchen, they're not upset with one another for getting into one another's way. Instead, as they would kind of bump into each other, they'd like, my brother is, I'm sure you can imagine, significantly taller than his wife. He would kiss her on the forehead. She'd kind of give him a squeeze, kind of pinch his butt, whatever else. And that's just the way they danced in the kitchen. That there would be these spontaneous connections and then spontaneous independence, and it was back and forth, and it seemed effortless. Now, I've learned not to comment on those things. I don't want people around me to feel self-conscious like I'm psychoanalyzing them, but it was really fun to watch, that it was just that they're both secure in that relationship. They dance beautifully in the kitchen. So, another is a proactive approach. One of the things that securely attached people tend to remember is that relationships are far more durable than we fear. Let me say that again. Relationships are often far more durable than we fear. And so people with a secure approach tend to assume that their relationships are durable, meaning that you and I can have a crucial conversation. You know, let's say we're friends, we're hanging out, you hurt my feelings or I hurt yours. You can sit down with me and say, hey, Matt, you really hurt my feelings, right? And I can go, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, but I trust in myself, I trust in you, we can have that conversation. That's a secure style, because most relationships are highly durable if we'll allow them to be. But instead, if you're upset with me and I go, oh no, she's upset with me, and I start, you know, like beating myself with a bat, no, I can't believe I'm such a bad person, and I run away and won't talk to her again, that's going to defeat the relationship. The relationship becomes fragile because I'm participating in the fragility. But people with a secure attachment style assume that relationships are durable. And so therefore, they will have crucial conversations, even stressful ones, with less fear, because they assume that everybody involved is trying their best to connect. So they're more likely to seek after mutually beneficial solutions, more willing to compromise, things like that. One of the other things that's very interesting in later research, this comes up much later in the literature, asking for help and willingness to ask for help relates to attachment styles. I've read several articles about that. It kind of blew my mind. That if you are somebody who can ask for help and not feel personal shame like you're inadequate or you're stupid or dumb for asking for help, but you can ask for help and not make it about you, that is actually a demonstration of a secure attachment. That you can go, okay, well, people need help sometime. I need help sometime. I'm a generally competent person, but I'm not competent in this way. Therefore, I'll ask somebody for help. They helped me, great. And now maybe we're even acquaintances or friends. Awesome, double win. Okay? And so it was interesting that that also came out of the literature. Now, What Ainsworth would say, if we could bring her back from the dead, she would say, brains. But let's pretend we could bring her back in a livelier sense than a zombie sense. What we would find is that she would say, of course, because these little toddlers could ask parents for help, and the parents would respond and actually be helpful. So the child learns at a young age. Some people, though, learn that skill later, learning to ask for help in a shame-free fashion. There was a stereotype about my generation and the generation just older than me. So I'm a member of Gen X. My parents are part of what's called the invisible generation. So after the greatest generation, but before the baby boomers, there was this little slice of people who were too young to go to war, and the baby boomers were born after the war. So my parents are of that generation. And it's notorious, and there's even, you see this on shows like Malcolm in the Middle and other sitcoms, where dad will not ask for directions. And they will get super lost 4 days because dad will not ask for directions. And so for some people, that's a learned skill. Learning to ask for help is a learned skill in an otherwise securely attached dynamic. And as you've seen in the sitcoms, if you're a fan of old sitcoms, it's usually gendered, that men won't ask for directions or men won't ask for help. So you can have an otherwise securely attached man who's been acculturated that that is weak, and therefore that might be their Achilles heel, is that one issue. So the other thing is vulnerable communication with less fear. Okay? Now, you notice I didn't say fear less. I presume you guys do something resembling crucial communication training, like crucial conversations, like how to have hard conversations with clients and colleagues and supervisors. And so I want to make it very clear, those are stressful for everybody. Okay? It doesn't matter what your attachment style or what your personality style is, crucial conversations are hard to manage for everybody. But there's ways to measure people's stress. And in fact, with modern technology, it's actually quite easy to do. So there are these little O2 sensors that'll clip on, they're little Bluetooth O2 sensors, oxygen sensors, that'll clip on the tip of your finger, and they'll measure your heart rate and oxygen saturation. That is a surprisingly easy and effective way to measure stress. And so one of the clinics that I worked in, I would joke with my supervisees and I would have them clip a little sensor on themselves, and I would clip one on myself, and then we would practice having various conversations. Like one supervisee of mine, we got a $50,000 take back from an insurance company. And we only have like 3 therapists in the clinic. So this could have like just bankrupted the business because she wouldn't do her case notes. Okay? For those of you that are therapists, getting your documentation done daily is your lifeline. Right? If you get audited and your documentation isn't done or it's done poorly, insurance companies go, you've got no proof that you're spending our dollars right, we're taking those dollars back. Oh my gosh. And so I have to have a crucial conversation with her. So I clip on the O2 sensor on my finger, she clips the O2 sensor on her finger coming in, and we both sit down and she goes, I know what this is about. She was worried she was going to get fired. I understand her worry, but she was too good a therapist to fire, but we needed her to do her paperwork, right? And so she's like, how are you so calm? And I hold up my O2 sensor. My resting heart rate's 58 usually. It was like 102. I said, I'm stressed out too. This is a hard conversation for both of us, and it's a conversation we need to have. And she's looking at hers, it's like 120. You know what I mean? And so it's fun that we can do these little devices and use that to normalize stress with one another, where supervisees are doing therapy or things like that. And so even though I've developed into a more secure style, and I love being with people, and she had too, it's still stressful for both of us, and that's okay. It's people who tend to feel secure and remember that relationships are durable that aren't panicking, and they're able to manage their stress. Remember, managing emotions is an important part of survival, and therefore they can actually accomplish the crucial conversation with fewer casualties. So something that we also find is that because they can have vulnerable conversations or crucial conversations with less fear, one of the reasons for that is they tend to have more empathy and compassion. They tend to have a better intuitive grasp for what's going on with other people emotionally and tend to connect to that more quickly. So therefore, that actually helps relationships feel more durable. When you have a sense that the other person that you're talking to isn't going to abandon you, they're not going to punish you, that everything's going to be okay, even if you have to have this hard thing, maybe get a write-up, etc., that at the end everything's going to be fine, they still respect you, then it's going to be stressful, but you'll be able to get through it because you have empathy for the person involved in this conversation, whether it be your supervisor or you as a supervisor talking to your supervisee. So, a question I'd like you to think about for a minute. In what sorts of relationships do you have these characteristics? Where you tend to be a little bit more trusting of yourself and others, you tend to be more simultaneous with independence and intimacy, where you tend to be more proactive, more willing to try risky things in the relationship, where you're willing to ask the other person for help. Like, what kinds of relationships pull for those characteristics from you, right? The reason why I want you to think about that is because we can endeavor to manifest those characteristics with other people. So, one of the best moms I've met is a dear friend of mine. And she was raised in violence and abuse. Mom was a prostitute, meth addict. She would pimp out her own children to get drugs. This poor friend of mine lived in hell until finally DCFS took her away at 15. And she's one of the best, most stable people I know. And one day, some years ago, I was asking her about that. I said, by rights, you should have had your own children taken away. You should be a drug addict. You should have all these problems. She says, yeah, I understand that. I said, what's different? And without a hint of arrogance, she said, I seek after people that are securely attached so I can practice that with them. Okay? Because every tendency, the people who feel comfortable to her, the people that are chaotic and unstable, because that's what she was used to. So it was uncomfortable for her to seek out people that trusted that the relationship was durable, had empathy and had compassion, and she sought them out and practiced it with them, right? And so one of the things that I would argue is that we can practice that with one another. We can practice the same kind of characteristics that help you feel securely attached. You can wonder about the characteristics other people have, and then you can practice that as well. So what do people with a secure style need? A whole bunch of things, because it turns out we humans are pretty needy people. A big one is communication. I'm not talking constant communication, I'm talking quality communication. Okay, I don't have my devil box on me right now. If I could make text messaging go away, I would lose half of my couples clients. Think about it for a minute. Is texting an effective way to communicate about deeply intimate and important emotional things? No. When we read a message, we tend to read it in the state of emotion and mind we are when the message comes in. So if I'm at work and I'm really having a stressful day, like this person, we need to pink slip, this person's overdosing on drugs, right? And I'm really stressed out and I get a text from my sweetie and it's, hey, are you picking the car up from the shop? I kid you not, the way it reads is, motherfucker, where's the car? You know what I mean? That's not what she said, right? She's thinking, she's running between classes, she's a school teacher, she's running between classes going, oh, we didn't arrange who to get the car. Are you picking up the car up today? We tend to read the text message in the state of emotion and mind we are in. And so therefore, one of the things that, one of the things that I'm hoping you all will practice is good communication in terms of what we need to develop a secure relationship is quality communication. And text messaging isn't it, okay? And some of you are saying, like, I had two dear friends of mine sitting on my couch at a barbecue a few years ago, and I'm watching them, we're all having a conversation, and they're texting with each other back and forth. And it took me a minute to realize they were texting each other. They're sitting a foot apart on my couch, and they're texting back and forth. Well, where they were fighting about their youngest getting caught with marijuana earlier that day, and they're having an argument on the couch. But so I say, hey, I'll leave so you guys can fight out. And they're like, no, this is the way we fight. It's great. It works for us. And I didn't say, no, it doesn't, because they're my friends. They're sitting on my couch. So I just smiled and nodded and went and got some more of my wife's famous baked beans. They were divorced 6 months later, okay? Text messaging is not a quality way of communicating. And so it's one where, how many of you have heard somebody say, oh, I met this guy on X date mate service, Tinder, Bumble, whatever, and he was so great, but when I met him face to face, it was like a totally different person. But we had all of these talks, we were talking and talking and talking, and he looked totally different. And I say, really, you guys were like, but you just met, how were you talking? And then they show me the text thread. You're not talking. You're not talking, you're texting. So you have imagined this dude in your head, and then you're disappointed that he didn't live up to your imagination. Okay? Securely attached people need quality communication, which is face-to-face. It doesn't mean necessarily gut-wringing depth of agony communication, although that needs to happen sometimes. Instead, it just means nose-to-nose, talking about what's going on, talking about how your day is, talking about sports, the weather, whatever else, but in an authentic way with one another. Okay? So clear, open, caring, authentic. So one of the things that we'll talk about one of these days is authenticity, because one of the things we find is when we look over time about people's way of trying to live authentically, one of the things we find is that if people have an individual definition of authenticity, I feel these feelings and I have an opinion, so I'm going to speak my truth from my point of view, and I don't care what your point of view is or what your truth is, I'm just going to be me, I'm being authentic. That actually predicts relationship disruption. Authenticity, when we look at it from a lens of secure attachment, means I am myself in relation to the other at the same time. That I have my voice, my perspective, they have their voice and their perspective, and it's about us singing in harmony, metaphorically speaking. It's about us coming together. So I have a very distractible style. I got a lot of energy, I'm constantly go, 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 one thing, one thing, one thing. And I know that to have an authentic relationship with my sweetheart, I need to stop. Like the other day, for example, we had an empty bedroom, and I go, woohoo! So I set up the stereo system in this empty room. Got my big old tower speakers, my big amplifiers. I am going to have a studio where I can just come at the end of my day, put on Spirit Box's new album, and sit back and just jam out for a little bit, okay? And so I'm sitting there in my chair, and I've just about got everything set up, and I hear this grunting coming from the living room. And I look, and there's my little petite wife, and she's dragging a lazy boy towards this room. I'm like, what are you doing? And she goes, oh, I'm bringing my chair into this room. I go, but this is my listening studio. And she says, yes, it's our listening studio. And I go, okay, help me understand what's going on right here. And she said, here's what will happen. You'll come home from work, you'll come upstairs, you'll kiss me, we'll have dinner together as a family, and then you will go into that room and I will not see you again until after I've gone to sleep. And it hit me like a hammer. She was exactly right. That's exactly what would happen. So I said, okay, so I lifted the lazy boy up, and now they're sitting right next to each other, right? And so she comes in, I got her these really nice, great big noise canceling headphones, because she likes 90% of my music, but not 100% of it. And so she can sit and watch her shows on her TV while I'm rocking out to music sitting next to her. And so one of the things that she did is she called me out on that, right? This is the authentic communication, that authenticity happens in relation. I was thinking only of myself. I'm speaking my truth, this is what I like. Forgetting that I'm kind of married, you know what I mean? And so therefore, if I want an authentic marriage, that requires me to participate in the marriage authentically, right? So we find people who, like my wife, who tend to take up authenticity as a relational event, tend to have more stable and long-lasting relationships. They're more secure. So one of the things that we also need to talk, we probably have a whole unit on boundaries one of these days. I did a presentation last week on the loving power of the word no, as we're teaching boundaries to a tech company up in Salt Lake. One of the things, though, that's interesting, when we look at boundaries from a secure attached lens, like we take up the secure attached bias, boundaries become inclusive. Notice I said ours, not my. Our boundaries are a way for us to maintain contact with one another. So think of the borders between states or between countries. That's a boundary, that particular border. Utah touches Nevada, right? That border is where they touch, it's where they connect. Boundaries from a secure attachment style is where we connect. And they are not dictated, they're mutually negotiable. Okay? So we negotiate boundaries together from a secure attachment perspective as a way to maintain contact and closeness with one another. And so that's very different than what we see on the TikToks and the Facebooks and the Instagram accounts and things like that, where I have my boundaries and screw them because I have my boundaries. That's coming from an insecure place, okay? Boundaries are, what boundary do we have around this particular issue, okay? From a secure perspective, boundaries are mutual. They're a way to stay in contact, not exclusive. So here's my boundary between the United States and this other country. My boundary is walls and guns and missiles and everything else. That's an insecure boundary. A secure boundary is, I'm not sure, okay, there's a kind of a line between the US and Canada. There's not even a wall, right? That shows a secure attached relationship. So whether you've been like northern Montana, places like that you can just walk into Canada and not know you're there. And so sometimes the boundaries need to be a little tighter than that, where we need to know where we touch. But even then, boundaries are mutually negotiated. So there's mutual interest and cooperation. Cooperation is not permission. So My social calendar is very booked. I tend to do concerts and things and barbecues and fun, and I love my friends and I love my family. And so what's interesting is like I've got a cousin I have not had a conversation with in 18 years. He lives a mile from my house. Not had a conversation with him in 18 years. There's been no falling out between us. We ain't beefing, okay? What happens is I'll call him and I'll say, hey bro, I'm roasting a whole hog this weekend. You gotta come. I've got this new marinade. It's gonna be killer. And he goes, awesome. I'll need to ask my wife if I can come. Yeah, so I saw the expression some of you had was the oh, bleh. Yes. That's an oh poop moment. It wasn't, let me check and see what the family calendar says, and if it's free, I'm going to come. Instead, it's he literally asks his wife for permission. Okay, that is not a secure attachment style. A secure attachment style is we coordinate, we cooperate, we don't give one another permission in face-to-face relationships, right? Now, when you're working with your kids, that's a different story. There needs to be permission. They need to ask you, hey, Dad, can I borrow the car? You're 12, no, okay? That it's different when we're talking about a power difference relationship. But when it comes to relating to a lover, this is cooperation, not power, right? That power is held mutually in authentic, securely attached relationships. So the other thing that when we look at secure attachment styles over time, that there is a way to love that is like this, and there's a way to love that is like this, and there's a way to love that is like this. Okay? So the secure attachment styles usually happen in the latter two. So loving like this means I need to know where you are, you need your location on, or if you come home, I'm gonna cling to you, and if you don't respond to my every whim, you left the mayo knife out again? How many have I told? This is weaponized incompetence, okay? And so that's not a terribly secure attachment. That's loving somebody like this. You have to conform to me. You have to do what I want. My way is the best way. Don't you dare have your own way, right? That tends to create a lot of relationship disruption. Loving like this means I am here to support you. You may come and go as you wish, or better yet, I'm here and within the bounds of this that we have already negotiated, I will love and support you within these boundaries, right? If you go off of that boundary, there's no love and support, here be dragons. You go off the edge of the map, I'm sorry. There's not a lot I can do for you there. For example, there are some friends of mine who do not believe in traditional monogamous marriage, and so therefore they practice polyamory. And they often love each other like this, where when we're within the bounds of ethically negotiated activity, then everything's okay. But if you do things that are off the bounds, then that can disrupt the relationship. Right? I've also seen parents, very G-rated, raise children like this, where they almost have a laissez-faire parenting style, where they have a list of just a few no-goes, there's only a few rules in the family, but anything else. You can go and do and be and everything else. Like, go live your life, here's just a few rules. Whereas loving like this means that you are always there to support. No matter how far away they are or how close they are, if they get close enough and they need the support, you're gonna hug them. Right? And so we see a secure attachment more with those latter two styles, whereas this one is not a healthy attachment style. And by the way, this one isn't either, but that's like an anti-attachment style. It's a rejecting style. We'll get to that in a minute. So one of the things that we find looking at the research of securely attached people who tend to endeavor these secure attachments is that they tend to weather change well. One of the things that it's interesting watching them because, like in marriage, for example, there was a study on men who had a generally secure attached style, and they had a partner also endeavoring a securely attached style. Okay, we on the same page? We got two people trying to be securely attached with each other. And they did a 20-year study on these men. And one of the things they were curious about is how does men's affection for their wives change over time? So, I'm picturing me in my wedding outfit. I couldn't even get a leg in the trousers of my wedding outfit, okay? Some of you may be the same way, where whatever outfit you were wearing when you got married, you ain't fitting in it today. I have changed substantially, not just in terms of my physical appearance, but in terms of my attitudes, my attributes, my personality, things like that. We change over time. Likewise, my sweetheart has as well. She cannot fit in her wedding dress, not even close, and thank goodness, because I like the way she is today just as much as I like the way she was back then. And they find that's consistent. When we had partners in this study that were practicing the secure attachment with one another, what we found is that as the women's bodies would change through just natural maturation, childbirth, things like that, the men's attitudes didn't. Oh my gosh, she's so much curvier now than she was, that's so hot. Oh, she's lost weight, oh my gosh, that's so hot. Oh, she's gained weight again, oh my gosh, that's so hot. That their attraction to their wives didn't vary. That if they were both practicing secure attachment, that they tend to find their bodies, the bodies of their wives, and the attraction, because men are very visual creatures disproportionately, that they tended to continue to find their wives attractive even as their wives would change. In fact, it was interesting because they did a qualitative part of that study, and they're asking the women, well, how attractive do you feel? And she says, I don't feel attractive unless my husband's in the room. You know what I mean? That was a theme in the study, that when he's there, he can't keep his hands off me. I have to tell him, come on, not now, honey, the kids are here. But it's one where the men tend to be good for the self-esteem of their wives when both of them are trying to practice a secure attachment. So with secure attachment styles, change is built in. They just know that people are going to grow and change, and that that attachment style will be ongoing and negotiated. So now we're going to talk about the three less secure or insecure attachment styles. So the first one is anxious preoccupied. This is the fear of abandonment style. So when Mary Ainsworth is doing her study and Mama leaves the room, the baby runs to the door where Mama left through and just melts down into a puddle and is just laying there just crying and screaming and everything else. When Mom comes back, the baby desperately clings onto Mom and won't let go. Okay? And so if Mom does anything to shift the baby around, they panic again and cling onto Mom tighter. So this is the fear of abandonment style. And so people with this particular style tend to need a lot of reassurance. They tend to need constant validation of themselves and the relationship. Like, see, my sweetie and I have been married for 34 years, and we have friends that got married around the same time we did. And I have friends who have also been married for 34 years going, why do I constantly have to tell my wife that when I'm going out with you, there won't be any other girls there? Now, he's never cheated on her, never looked at another woman in an R-rated way, but still she needs that constant validation from him that he's not going anywhere and that she wouldn't approve of and does not have nefarious intent. To this day, 34 years later, she will call me and I will have to turn on Marco Polo and turn the camera around to prove that he's sitting in my backyard with me. Okay? And so it's that constant fear of abandonment, that constant need of validation and support. So there's that fear of being left by their partner, even if the partner has given no indication that the partner is interested in leaving. The other thing we find with this particular characteristic or this style is worth is dependent upon relationship. That the self-worth and identity of one person, of one partner, is dependent upon the other. Okay, I won't name names because it broke my heart one day because we had an event, a neighbor comes in and he sits down and he's not with his wife. And it kind of gutted me because his wife is one of the life of the parties kind of gals. And I don't mean that like she's, lampshade on head, drunk as a skunk, dancing on my tail, but really just warmly greets everybody, is interested in everybody, engages with everybody, makes the party feel secure for everybody who walks in. Giver of appropriate hugs, and I'm like, what's going on? He says, we had a major meltdown and everything else. And I go, oh, I'm so sorry. He says, yeah, she's gained a lot of weight and I'm ashamed to be seen with her in public. I don't want people looking at me and going, he's with her. And so we've been fighting about her weight for years, and so I just couldn't take it anymore. I can't be seen with her. Oh boy. And so I've seen the inverse, some years ago, a friend of mine changed her career. And after she did so, her husband changed his career. She's like, okay, I'm sick and tired of the corporate life. I'm going to do the not-for-profit thing. She got really happy. He did the same thing. He quit the corporate grind, did the not-for-profit life. Their income goes down by 3/4, you know what I mean? And then she starts, when are you going to be a man and make me money? You know what I mean? And he's like, but wait, you got to quit your job to do this, and I'm happy now at this job. And she goes, yeah, but I'm embarrassed. Now we drive Kias. We used to drive Mercedes. And so that was the death knell of their relationship over time. That when our identity is dependent upon the other person, that shows that we're not secure in who we are. So jealousy and possessiveness is a big one. I already gave you the example of my cousin, and he and I used to be close. Haven't talked to him in 18 years. Lives a mile away. Okay? His wife is very jealous and possessive of him. Now, I'd like to distinguish jealousy and envy, because there is a third alternative to jealousy and envy. Jealousy is when we believe we possess something or someone and we don't want anybody else to have it. No, this is mine, right? That's jealousy. He is mine, she is mine. Do not touch, do not look, mine, okay? That's, okay, a little bit of Mordor in there, but that's jealousy, okay? Envy is when somebody else is having an experience or an object or something that we wish we had and we don't, okay? That's envy. And so my sweetie the other day went to a concert without me. Not jealous at all. She gets to do her own thing. She's her own person, right? But when she got back, I felt envious because she had a great time. It was a Neil Diamond impersonator. And my wife has this theory, there are two types of people in the world, those who like Neil Diamond and those who don't. And I don't, and she married me anyway. But when she came back and she was talking about what great fun she had with her friends, her auntie, her cousins, right? I felt envy that she had that experience. But I didn't want to possess her and tell her she couldn't go, okay? The answer to both of those, by the way, if you're curious, is compersion. It's the answer to envy, which is this compassionate co-living of joy. That when she comes back and I start feeling envious, man, I should have gone, I don't like Neil Diamond, it would have been great to hang out with these people. And then I go, no, I'm going to practice sympathetic joy, compersion, right? I'm sorry, there's a word for it in the Pali Canon in Buddhism, and the words, I'm blanking on that word right now, metta. And so I just, okay, I'm aware of this, so I'm gonna start practicing this with her. But then what happened? Really, then the Neil Diamond impersonator came down and started like making smoochy faces at your auntie and she nearly passed out? That's so cool, right? That's a solution for envy, is actually getting into the joy of the experience. So emotional intensity. Insecurity and jealousy can manifest as anxiety and anger that then can often have accompanying outbursts. I would like to say that there's the outburst, where have you been? Well, I told you I'd be home at 11, it's 10:30. Yeah, where have you been? I was at Draper's house. Yes, and why did it take you so long? You said I could be out until 11, right? And so that's when there's outbursts. But I would also like to say there's inbursts as well, okay? One of the things that is an interesting question when we're dating or living with somebody with an insecure style like this is the unintentional emotional punishment that can happen, okay? Intentional emotional punishment is when I'm feeling insecure and I lash out, right? That's intentional. I'm feeling abandoned by you, even though we had negotiated this boundary in advance. My insecurities are raging and I'm gonna take it out on you, right? That's an outburst. An inburst is, oh, you're finally home. I'm so depressed and suicidal and I'm gonna go and just sit and just pull the tar of hell onto myself and hate my life. And so the other partner, here's kind of a weird way to think of it. It's like the other partner now feels blamed for the insecure partner's suffering. And so that becomes an unintentional emotional punishment. The person feeling insecure isn't thinking, I'm taking this out on them. Okay? Instead, the person being punished now has to change their attitude, their attribute, their style, their plans for the evening, everything to compensate for the person that's imploding. And when you're busy or you have other things to do, that can feel very punishing, that now I've got to stop everything I need to do in order to reassure you. Okay? So there's outward punishment, how dare you? And there's inward punishment, I suck. And either way, it has a pretty big emotional effect on our partner. Okay, what I'm about to say is R-rated in a violent way. I hope this isn't too triggering. Years ago, I was at a club, young man, and a gentleman comes up to me and he looks at me and he says, it would be harder for a 9mm bullet to go through you than the average man. And I'm thinking two things simultaneously. That is both true, and that's a hell of a way to start a conversation. And so it was one where he needed a bodyguard. He needed somebody big and thick to be around him, that if somebody intended violence towards him, the violence would have to go through me first. And so I got, oh man, that's really flattering when he said that. So I started going to these schools and classes and everything. I'm gonna be a bodyguard when I grow up. And that lasted 3 weeks. Because I went to a training with a former member of the CIA, and this was a time back in the 80s when airplane hijacking was a big thing, for those of you old enough to remember that. And so one of the things that I said is, well, why don't the people on the plane just fight back against the hijacker? And the trainer said, and he gave examples like, written out, because back then nobody had cell phones where you just take video, but written accounts of the hijackers trying to take over the plane, and that people on the plane would stand up to try to fight the hijacker, so the hijacker would just start cutting or shooting innocent people until the aggressor sat his butt back down again. Okay, why do I give you that example? Some of you have been in a marriage like this, where there will be other casualties when they're upset with you, and they make themselves the casualty, where they're hurting themselves emotionally or physically, or they'll take it out on the kids, or something like that. You guys get where I'm coming from? And that's a sign of a pretty out of control insecure attachment style. So you feel held hostage in the relationship. So there's a lot of emotional intensity in these particular relationships. In fact, later when I asked this friend of mine, the one that was texting his wife on my couch rather than them talking, it was because both of them tended to have this very intense way of relating. And so therefore, the only way they could prevent the blow-ups from happening was by texting back and forth. Because anytime they tried it face-to-face, that would provoke both of their insecurities, and there would be a nuclear war, metaphorically speaking. So the other part of it is enmeshed in codependent boundaries. Codependent boundaries are where the boundary is not safe, that the boundary is actually a place of a tearing apart or a tearing away or war, rather than it being a boundary of togetherness and safety, okay? So back to the example we gave earlier, that imagine you have a partner that when you have a bad day, they are now automatically having a bad day, okay? What that will teach you very quickly is you're not allowed to have a bad day, because now that relationship is codependent. The boundary is whatever you're feeling, or the boundary is whatever they are feeling. Like, I can't tell you how often it is when I'm doing couples counseling that one member of the couple will get brave enough to say, anytime I try to point out what he or she is doing, they then implode and blame themselves, so then I've given up on saying anything at all, okay? And so then what's interesting is that in real time, you can watch the other partner implode. And then as a counselor, I get to comment, wow, that just happened. They mentioned that, and I'm watching you implode in real time. Can you tell me what's going on, like what's going through your head? And it's usually, I'm suck, I'm awful, I'm the problem, I'm the reason why this marriage won't work, right? That shows a codependent boundary. Rather than this person saying, hey, can we both have feelings? And that both our feelings matter? Instead, it's the only feelings that are allowed in the room is the loudest feeling, and then both of us have it, okay? So here's a challenge. One of my favorite philosophers is a fellow by the name of Mikhail Bakhtin, and he was writing behind the Iron Curtain and was not made known to the West until after the USSR fell. USSR becomes Russia, and we now have access to what was going on behind the Iron Curtain the whole time. And he spent a lot of time in the Gulag. Like, the communist regime was not a fan of this guy, so they kept throwing him in prison. But one of the things he did is he managed to get copies of psychology literature, like Sigmund Freud and things like that. And as he reads Freud, he goes, wait, if I understand correctly, Freud says that empathy is feeling what the other person feels. That's empathy. He says, if you're a therapist and somebody comes in crying in despair, and in empathy you are crying in despair as well, who then is helping? He says, maybe what therapists need is compassion, not empathy. Compassion is acknowledging and appreciating what the other person feels, and then giving a compassionate response to it, not joining them in the feeling, okay? And so that's been a technique that my colleagues have used in couples counseling for years. That one person in these enmeshed codependent boundaries, if they're really distraught, then the other person's distraught, nobody's helping, things fall apart. And so it's compassion training, recognizing what your partner is feeling, appreciating that, and then offering them what they need in that space, rather than just diving into that mud and drowning in it as well. So the clingingness we've already talked about. I need to know where you are, what's going on, I need constant reassurance that we're okay, things like that. Okay, the next is dismissive avoidant. This is where mom leaves the room, back in the research, right? Toddler's left alone in the room, mom leaves the room, toddler may not notice that mom's gone. Mom's comes back, tries to pick up the baby, and the baby's like straight arming mom. Nah, don't need you. Goes back to playing with the toys. Stranger walks in, mom walks out, baby looks up, stranger's there, moves to the other side of the play place, keeps playing with toys, has nothing to do with the stranger. Okay? So this is what's known as the avoidance style. These are people who tend to abandon other people. So the first group, right, they're anxious, they're afraid of being abandoned. This group does the abandoning. Okay, spoiler alert, they tend to find each other. where you got the one that's terrified of being abandoned, having a massive crush on the one who just does the abandoning. I can't tell you how often they get married. But if we do too much prevention work, then they'll stop having kids and then I'll be out of a job. So maybe we should, no. Okay, so one of the things we find is that people with this kind of dismissive and avoidant style tend to create a lot of emotional distance around themselves. So they detach emotion from the relationship, they deny the importance of emotion, and they seem aloof or detached. In your life, how many times have you heard people say, I am in a functional marriage. I come in and I either take care of the kids or I pay the bills, and that's my role, and I've given up on anything else. Okay? Now, here's what's interesting. Sometimes that's true, that nothing else works. And therefore, they're just there to make sure the kids have a roof over their head or that this particular set of needs are met, and that's all they exist for. Yes, sometimes that unfolds in a relationship. But one of the things I've noticed is that some people deny their own responsibility for that. That rather than trying to connect and trying to engage and trying to have a close relationship with their significant other, instead, as that becomes difficult, they just distance themselves more and more to the point where they just have this functional relationship. There's no romance, there's no love, it's just I pay the bills, I do the yard work, or I wash the dishes and I clean the car, or whatever arrangement there is, but that becomes a very functional role. That one of the things that's hard to do is, am I engaging in avoidance by doing that? Are there hard conversations that maybe I need to have? Now it begs a question whether or not your partner is a safe person to have that conversation with. But then another thing is if you don't believe in relationship durability, every conversation is going to feel like a crisis, and therefore you'll tend to avoid it. So, independence and self-reliance. These are folks who follow their own needs, make their own plans. They may feel puzzled or frustrated by other people's needs. Like Freud, for example, talked about a lot of ego defenses. Denial. What? No, I don't have a crush on her. No, I don't know what you're talking about, right? Denial is a big one. Another is intellectualization. Intellectualization is turning an emotionally complex problem into a matter of logic. Your upset is illogical. I was 5 minutes late picking up the kids. That was mildly inconvenient to them. Yes, I did not get our daughter to cheerleader practice on time, and yes, she's in trouble with the coach, but you're being irrational by bringing it up, and the coach is being irrational. It's only 5 minutes. Okay, you guys get intellectualization? That's where there's this complex emotional thing that they just make a matter of logic. That is often associated with a masculine style of avoidance, right? And by the way, if you're curious, it's a great way to gaslight people. Okay, I'm going to teach you this evil thing. Please don't do it. With great power comes great responsibility, okay? But this is how I've seen a lot of people gaslight their partners. That we come in, there's all of this emotional distress. I'm the avoidant person. I'm not participating in the emotional distress. And so I get to sit down and tell my partner, well, you're just crazy, or you're just irrational. Because when you look at it rationally, everything's fine. Okay? It's a great way to gaslight people. Please don't do that. Okay? That's something that we see a lot in couples counseling. So, independence and self-reliance, puzzled by other people's needs, intimacy issues. They tend to minimize vulnerability. They may feel anxious when partner seeks to deeply connect. They may tend to tend to withdraw, put up barriers. Oh, I'm too busy. Like, I'm thinking of a friend of mine. You know, different subcultures within the United States have different periods of crisis in marriage. Okay? Some of you have heard of the 7-year itch, where after 7 years in a committed relationship, some people are like, because that's when a lot of relationships break up. Not locally. Locally, especially amongst the devoutly religious, when relationships tend to crumble is when the youngest is in high school. Okay? Because they stayed together for the kids. I could have a whole lesson on the destruction that myth has caused, but they stay together for the kids. And so when the kids are old enough that the kids don't need them anymore, they break up. And so a friend of mine was fearing that because she'd seen that data. And so she goes on Instabook or whatever Facebook, social media thing, and downloads this intimate questions to ask your partner. Her husband is a dear friend of mine, and he is an avoider's avoider. This is him happy. You ready? I'm going to do his happy face. This is him gutted. Just learned that his favorite dog died. Okay? This is him really upset with his kids. Okay? Doesn't do the emotion thing very well. And so she gets this quiz asking deeply intimate, personal questions. And suddenly he was too busy. See, his car breaks down on the way to work. That there's all of these crises that magically happen so they can't have these conversations. He's avoiding it like crazy. Now, She's normally securely attached, but back to our theme that we participate in attachment, she starts feeling less and less secure, so she starts demanding more and more reassurance that then he avoids and avoids and avoids, and the very thing she was trying to prevent starts happening. So, commitment phobia. A dear friend of mine, her current boyfriend has had their engagement ring sitting on the shelf of his closet. She knows exactly where it is. She can see it from his bed. It's been sitting there for 4 years. Yeah, maybe a little bit of a commitment phobia there, just a little, right? So another one is minimization of feelings and problems. That I can't handle this, so I'm just going to minimize the feelings. I'm not upset, you're upset, right? That we're going to do everything we can to keep everything calm because I don't handle feelings well. So that's where intellectualization can come back in. Now, if we're generally securely attached, what kinds of relationships would prompt for this kind of dynamic from us? Right? Think about it for a minute. What kinds of relationships have you found yourself engaging in some of these avoidant characteristics, even if you're not normally avoidant? I bet you probably these characteristics. And so back to my argument, I often see these people end up in committed relationships for a period of time together. So the last style that we're going to talk about is disorganized. This is both somebody who is avoidant and fearful of being abandoned at the same time. Like I ran headlong into this in college. I have a dear friend, and she was the kind of person that while she was dating a man, she happens to be heterosexual, as she was dating a man, she would have one man ready to go to jump into a relationship with, and then a second one that was a possibility third one that was a possibility should the second one not come through. That she always had a string of at least 3 lovers going on all the time. And so what would happen is whichever lover she was currently with, she could sabotage that relationship and immediately bail into the next one. And if that one, she'd immediately bail into the next one. And so I'm watching this friend of mine just burning through relationships like crazy. Well, in her particular set of interests, in her particular subculture, it's only so large. And within 4 years, she's like, nobody will date me. No, well, look, what's wrong? Am I unattractive? No, she was plenty attractive. But everybody that would normally date her had learned, okay? So it's interesting, she has this push me, pull you. Come here, come here, come here, come here. Go away, go away, go away. Come here, come here, come here, come here. Go away, go away, go away. It's like, come here, come here, come here. Come on, nope, now you're too close, right? Come hug me. What the hell are you hugging me for? You know what I mean? That kind of relationship. And so one of the things that Ainsworth saw when she was testing these toddlers is mom would walk in, set the baby down, and the baby would ignore mom. And then after a while, mom would get the cue to leave. So mom would leave and come back in, and the baby would go screaming and running up to mom. And as mom would pick up the baby would like two-fist mom's chest. Like demanding to be held and pushing mom away at the same time. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I dated him in high school, right? And so that's one of the things that we find in this particular dynamic. It's come here and go away. Don't be too close, don't be too far, but also don't be in the middle ground because I'm going to want you closer. But the second you're too close, I'm going to want you to leave. But now you're too far, you need to come closer. You're too close, right? And so this is also known as the disorganized style, as you can see on the slide. So this tends to predict a lot of conflict. Conflict is normative. Okay, I would have to talk about this in a G-rated way. There was a group of us the other day, we were doing a big training on relationship counseling, and it's amongst, our clients are disproportionately young adults in that particular setting, many of whom have a substance abuse history. And so one of the things that we're trying to wrestle with is how to have people have healthy boundaries with each other as we're coming out of addiction, because boundaries are often ruptured and violated, if not nuked. And so one of the things the clients kept saying in group is, but having a sexual relationship with somebody with this disorganized style, it's the best sex you'll ever have. And so our point was, why? You know what I mean? So we keep hearing this out of these group members, men and women, and we keep hearing it and hearing it and hearing it. And it's that intensity, disengagement, intensity, disengagement, intensity, disengagement. But what we found is it wasn't actually about the person that is their lover. It's about their own disorganization. That they want the other person to come here and go away, come here and go away, come here and go away. That the intensity they were bringing to the table. And it took another person with an insecure style to join them in that. Because a securely attached person would be like, nope, Not, nope, I'm done. Nope, bye. Thank you. Great date. Don't call me. Lose my number. Okay? What is that? Block, delete. And so one of the things that allowed us to do that particular conversation is bring that insight back to group and say, this actually isn't about the person that you're dating. It's about you and your need for emotional instability to feel okay. I know that sounds weird, but some of you may be able to read that if there is not some kind of pain in my life or in my relationships, something must be wrong. And so some people take it to the next level. I will create the pain and discomfort so that way I feel okay. Okay, some of you have heard this maybe from friends, family, or clients. If I'm happy, I don't dare be happy for long because that means something bad's going to happen. So they sabotage their own security, right? So this intense intimacy coupled with rejection, there's this manifest distrust and yet demand for trust. There's this fearful avoidance coupled with fear of rejection, emotional instability and volatility. Oh boy. So there's also boundary violations that even the negotiated boundaries are often inconsistent and contradictory. Wait, I thought you said that it was okay for me to go to this concert with my friends. Well, yes, but I was in a bad mood when you left, so you should have known, right, that these boundaries are constantly being disrupted and violated. So at the same time, though, there's self-sabotage, clinging to those that are rejecting to those that are loving and supportive. Like I've heard this before from my friends through the years of, oh my gosh, he's so clingy. And then the next week it's a complaint that, oh my gosh, he won't even talk to me. And now he's too clingy. And now he won't talk to me. Or she won't talk to me and she's too clingy. Right? That there's that demand for that come here, go away, that keeps the relationship in a perpetual state of chaos and discomfort, which feels normal to some people. So, in what sort of relationships is this pulled for from us? If we're normally relatively securely attached, what kind of relationship pulls this from us? Right? It's probably not a secure one. It might be an avoidant one, or it might be an anxious one, but oftentimes the same kind of relationship. Like, what was it, Zoolander, when the Will Ferrell character goes, am I the only one not taking crazy pills? That sometimes in relationship we feel this way, where we're like, what is going on here? Like, I don't normally behave this way. Like, I'm at 3 a.m. doubting my own sanity and my own worth. That's never happened in a relationship before. And then I called, Matt the next morning. He's on his way to work, and I'm just crying on his shoulder. And Matt goes, why are you persisting in this relationship? And I kid you not, the answer 9 times out of 10 is, but I love him, or but I love her, as though that trumps sanity. Okay? Yep, you're right. Love always trumps sanity. So one of the things that can be very difficult is to make sure that love is safe and healthy. And so it's really hard to leave. In fact, one of the things that, for those of you who are working in the mental health field, one of the things you look at when it comes to relationships, especially chaotic relationships like these, is where is the love and loyalty? Because that's often the chains that bind people together, even as they keep sprinting apart from one another and the chains keep tearing at their souls, is where's the loyalty? Where's that coming from? Because we find in these relationships, there's often a lot of great emotional, a lot of passion. There might even be a lot of humor, a lot of laughter, a lot of really fun, amazing emotional experiences, as well as the agony of come here, go away, of grabbing and seizing onto as well as throwing away and rejecting, that all of that can happen as well. And so it can be a real challenge to help people sort through every link of love, loyalty, humor, compassion, etc., linking to people that keep doing this, tearing each other apart. Okay. So there are needs for insecure attachments generally. Of course, my huge bias, I'm a therapist, I'm going to tell you to seek therapy. It is not you as the partner's job to change the other person, and it is not their job to change you. It is both your jobs to have an authentic relationship together. And if that is impossible because of things going on your end and it's interfering with love or work or both, then that's something that you need to look into. One of the things that I greatly appreciate about my wife, she uses me as a sounding board, as a giver of hugs and kisses, and as a companion at heavy metal concerts, as a parent to our children, but I'm not her therapist. Right? She's got something, she's starting to decompensate, I'm trying to love and hug her through it, and she goes, I need to go see a therapist, and I say, great. Right? Do that, let me know how I can help. Okay? Because, like you and I were talking a minute ago, To my dad, I'm not Dr. Draper, teaching awards and research awards and all those other things, not some public intellectual. To my kids, I'm just dumb old dad. And so therefore, I can tell them a profoundly true principle, and they just roll their eyes. Likewise, with my sweetie, I am not a psychologist to her. I'm the homeless kid she met when we were teenagers who was strung out on drugs, right? As well as all of my accomplishments since. But she doesn't see me as some kind of successful academic or professional. What she sees me as is her husband that's walked through hell with her, right? So therefore, she doesn't take me up as a therapist. And so it's important for us to have a third perspective. One of the things that is really hard for us to do, and this disorganized style actually predicts this. Have any of you heard of the male loneliness epidemic? Okay, only a couple of you? Well, it's a thing. Loneliness is killing men. Men's suicide rates are very, very high. Men's addiction rates, mental health issue rates are very, very high. And a lot of that is strongly related directly to loneliness. And so one of the things that guts me is that loneliness epidemic often comes up in the debate between men and women, and are men toxic or women, and that's actually a false debate. Most of men's loneliness epidemic arises from men's lack of close relationships with other men. And it's interesting to me how lonely many of my male friends are. That when I have them come over for a Warhammer game, or a new heavy metal CD is dropped and we're gonna bang our heads to it, or whatever else, that's often the only social contact they've had apart from their significant other in a month or 2 months or 3 months since I saw them last. That there's this way we're raising boys and men, that their significant other is their only person. And that can set up this kind of dynamic unintentionally. Where when our other, like our spouse or our girlfriend, if we're men and we're heterosexual, that they become all of my everything. They're my sun, my moon, my starlit sky, they are everything. And that puts all of my needs on a singular person. Human beings were not evolved that way. Human beings are very sociable, communal creatures. We're primates. We're not just meant to be in a cave with one other primate. We're meant to be out with the other primates, okay? And so that's one of the things is I've noticed that that can kind of exacerbate the style when it normally wasn't there. Is the man only has his wife. That's the one person he can cry around. That's the one person he can hug. That's the one person he can have real feelings with. And that puts a lot of pressure on the partner. And so sometimes they can't because they're juggling kids and job and everything else. They can't just be this ongoing emotional font. And so one of the things that I strongly encourage is men to figure out how to be friends. And there's ways to do that. Maybe another day that we can talk about that. But for now, that's a surprising way where it can evoke this particular style. Where when you're your significant others only, and you're not always emotionally available for them because they don't have other friends, then they might feel guilty for coming and being too intimate. That can feel too vulnerable for them, and so then they're rejecting. And so it can be not necessarily a toxic one, but at least a subtle version of this. So increased self-awareness, right? What is my part in all of this? Like okay, I have a sister that is surprised that one of her daughters will not speak to her. And it's not a surprise to any of the rest of us. Okay, she is a very dogmatic member of a particular religion, and that for her to be a good mother, her children must conform to that culture of that religion and do so in a flawless way for her to feel like a good mother. And so she loves her children like this. And so her daughter ran away to Ohio. Okay, and so again, it's not a surprise to the rest of us, but she keeps blaming the daughter for her own insecurities. And so what's really hard to do is for us to really look deeply about what our own insecurities are and endeavoring to take ownership of that. Ownership is not shame and self-blame. Ownership is acknowledgement of tendency. In these particular situations, I tend to do this. I would like to do that less, and so I'm going to seek out support and skills to do that less. Practicing healthy boundaries. That's where, remember, boundaries are negotiable. They're mutual. How do we stay in contact? What is good for me, you, and us? That's the 3 parts of authenticity. I, thou, and we. Okay? And then the last part is practice patience and determination. We are all growing. We're all changing. We're all developing. Therefore, boundaries are a source of ongoing renegotiation. Okay? Like, I was in theater as a young man, and when you're in theater and you're in small troops, it's not uncommon that you're sharing dressing rooms with people of various genders and sexual orientations. And you get used to it, it's not a thing. But I got to a certain age where my fellow actors are sending me pictures, and she's like, how does this look on me? And it's something very revealing for a play. And my wife goes, I'm old enough now, I would prefer that not to happen. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about it. She's like, I appreciate they're not coming on to you, and that's not what it's about. At the same time, though, I'm doubting my body. And I'm like, you have no reason to doubt my body. Of course, you've always had a crush on me. Of course you would say that, but I doubt my body. And so we negotiated that boundary. So now my friends know, if you're sending me a picture of yourself attired, please be sufficiently covered that it doesn't frustrate my poor sweetheart, right? And so these boundaries are negotiated, and they're an ongoing thing. So another thing about practicing healthy boundaries and looking at our part in it is there's this lovely line from the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying you all have probably seen before. If you're in a therapy field or adjacent field, probably seen a poster of it. It goes, I walk down the road, there's a large hole in the road, I fall in. I'm angry and upset, it's not fair, it's not my fault, it takes me a long time to get out of the hole. The next day, I walk down the road, there's a large hole in the road, I fall in. I'm still angry, I'm still upset, it's still not my fault, but I get out quite quickly. The next day, I walk down the road, there's a hole in the road, I fall in the hole in the road, it is my fault, I did this eyes wide open, I pop right out immediately. The next day, I walk down the road, I walk around the hole. The next day, I choose a different road, okay? And so this lovely, old saying about learning about ourselves, that there's a lot of things that don't feel like our fault when we are participating in them, even if unintentionally, right? We often don't want to participate in the disruption of a relationship. We want to have that relationship. But because of habit, because of insecurity, because of all of these things, we're inadvertently participating in them. And it takes a while for us to develop the insight of how it is that we're participating in these problems. So it takes practice. Sometimes we fall in the hole repeatedly before we get it down. So for anxious people, those that are clinging and needing lots of reassurance, we've got those general skills that we just talked about, right? These, plus mindfulness and coping. Like, one of the things that is pretty hard to practice is remembering there's no bears right here, right now. Okay, right here, right now, you're in a conference room, it's warm in here, at least it is to me. We're on chairs varying in degrees of comfort, right? There's nobody trying to harm us right now, there's nobody trying to hurt us, and yet some of us may be feeling anxiety right now, okay? That's not uncommon. In our society, it's quite normal. One of the things we do is we tend to live 2 minutes to hours to years in the future, even when we're sitting here in the moment. Some of you have even seen, like in Kung Fu Panda, there's that lovely line that sadness is yesterday, fear is tomorrow, everything's okay right now, it's a gift, that's why we call it the present, right? I butchered that quote, but you guys get where I'm coming from. There's no bears charging us right now. There's nobody shooting at us or assaulting us or calling us names or anything else. And so one of the things that can be a very helpful skill to master is practicing mindfulness. And there's a bunch of skills we can go over at some point on how to do that. So paying attention to current environment, the current situation, learning to accept what we're experiencing in the moment without reservation or judgment. Developing awareness of negative thoughts as just thoughts. And we can accept the thoughts or we can challenge them. There's various skills there. There's also another one, which is self and other compassion is another form of coping. Knowing oneself and knowing the other and having compassion for both. Like, I'm really appreciating a dear friend of mine. He models this very, very well. And he does it for me, he does it for his kids, he does it for his sweetheart, where when there's tension in the room, his first response, rather than getting upset, is to very kindly say, please help me understand what's going on with you right now. Right? Just please help me understand. Like, I'm terrible at poker. I don't have a poker face, man. You can tell exactly what card I've got. Bad card, right? Good card. And so it was too late, it's 4 a.m., I'm exhausted, my bedtime's 10 p.m., and I'm getting increasingly frustrated. The game is not going my way. I started with 50 chips, I'm down to 1, I'm not having fun, and I'll never forget, John just sets his cards down and says, hey, what's going on? You seem a little upset. And then I am upset, I'm really broken, I suck at this game, I'm so tired. He says, great. If you want to, you can go, we'll finish up the game. If you need to go rest, we still love you, go do that. And I'm like, you damn hippie. And then I thought, yeah, that's exactly what I'm gonna do. Gave him a hug, went upstairs, went to bed, you know what I mean? And so he deliberately does this self and other compassion. He sees me distressed, that's decreasing his fun. He has compassion for himself where he can check in and go, it's less fun when Draper's being a bit of a jerk about this. And then he can check in with me and say, hey, what's going on with you? Rather than him going, you're being a jerk, Draper, and I throw the table, yeah, you're being a jerk, and we got the clash of the titans, right? Instead, he'll just kind of take a beat and go, hey, what's going on with you? So, developing coping skills. Goodness gracious. Sleep, diet, exercise, mindfulness, self-soothing, maintaining close relationships and figuring that out. These are key coping skills that we often forget. Again, back to the little O2 sensors on fingers. When you're doing couples counseling, it's really fun because some people are suffering a condition called flooded. That means their heart rate is elevated, their O2 is down a little bit. It's a sign of an extreme stress response, and they often don't even know it. You know the time to prevent a panic attack is hours or days before the panic attack starts? That some of us are so used to just a basal level, just a base level of stress and anxiety. Imagine a cup that has a meniscus on the top. A meniscus is when the water is stacked up above the rim of the cup, that any one little drop, like running late for school, or getting talked to ornery by my super, and then the whole thing just overflows, right? Many people in our society live with that meniscus stress. That is an entire cup of stress, and they're ready to overflow at any given second. They often don't know how tense they are. They often don't know what their heart's rate, because they're used to checking out of their bodies in order to function in our very toxic society, where we're go, 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 go all the time. And so just trying to teach people to stop and check in can be quite a challenge. So, particularly to dismissive avoidance. So you got the in general, plus emotional regulation. There's a phenomenon called alexithymia. Alexithymia is a struggle to tune in to what somebody is feeling emotionally, tune into themselves and what they're feeling emotionally, and then articulating what they're feeling. Like Adam, you showed me one of your cards, had a whole like emotion matrix on, all these little cartoony faces. How do you feel today? Okay? And so with each one of those, it's interesting that those actually have, as cliche as they look in every therapist office, trust me, we need them as therapists. Because I've got clients, and not all of them are men, but about 70% of them are, when I need to teach them the difference between two conditions. Is it okay if I use a swear word here? Okay. Because like 3 years ago, I had a client who went, okay, how are you feeling today, Bob? He'd go, shitty. And that was his word for dozens of different emotions. But he couldn't distinguish between frustrated, conflicted, under pressure, sad, grieving, angry. It was just all under this one umbrella. Shitty. How you doing today, Bob? I'm cool. And that's a whole dozens of positive emotions. Elated, joyful, happy, connected, right? And so that's one where when we work with people who have this kind of avoidant style, what's hard for us to remember is the first person they avoid is themselves. Let me say that again. The first person they avoid is themselves. And so therefore trying to help them tune into their own bodies and into their own feelings can be quite a challenge. It took Bob months. Okay, what are you feeling? Holding up the little matrix. And he's like looking at me, am I feeling this? And I'm like, I don't know. Let's break down the definition of that term. Here's where it's often felt in the body. Does this resonate with you? Do you feel it? Yeah, I think I do. You know what I mean? Now keep in mind, he's a successful professional, really good guy, but just out of touch with himself, avoiding himself first. So another is develop this self-awareness, right? Self-awareness, self-compassion, self-efficacy, things like that. So personal development of interests and hobbies that bring contentment, joy, or awe, that's a double-edged sword though, okay? So one of the things that happens is many people get stuck in functional routine where everything they do serves a functional purpose for the relationships they have, okay? I am the one that does these jobs in our household, or I'm the one that brings in these resources, and that's what we do. You have your list, I have my list, and that's how we live. One of the things that can be really tricky is helping people develop themselves when they have an avoidant style, because some of them then will use their hobbies to avoid, okay? So just be aware of that. If you're helping somebody develop themselves, help them just kind of call it out in advance. Hey, you know, you're taking up this particular hobby of, you know, restoring old cars. How can you do that in a way where you're not using that in an avoidant sense? And so practicing intimacy can be really tricky. No one will hurt you worse than the one you love because no one else can. You will hurt no one else worse than the ones who love you because no one else can. Intimacy is a fool's game that we all need to play. Okay? So I just wanted to assure you that if you're working with somebody who has an avoidant style and you're asking them to practice intimacy, you are asking them to be hurt. You are also asking them to be open to joy, because those go together. Okay? Think of the worst heartbreaks you've ever suffered. I bet you it wasn't from a stranger. Okay? And so when you're asking people to practice intimacy, you are asking them to avail themselves to emotional harm. At the same time, though, think of your greatest joys. I bet you those happened in relationship too. Here's the kicker. When you're my age, it was probably the same person that was implicated in both your worst heartbreak and your greatest joy. So it's a big ask. Practicing intimacy means I need to get in touch with who I am and help get in touch with who you are at the same time. This is practicing a new set of skills that many people start getting as toddlers. I've not had the opportunity to practice, or maybe I haven't practiced in a long time. So it takes patience and commitment on everybody's part. Because intimacy requires a great deal of vulnerability. For me to be open to what the other person thinks and feels, even if I don't like it, and even if it hurts sometimes. And then likewise, developing mutual trust. There is a devastating observation in the literature on infidelity trauma. Okay, infidelity trauma is when one partner in a committed relationship cheats on the other partner. The number one source of agony is the partner who cheated on the partner who needs the comfort and support, the person who was cheated on. They're the greatest source of agony, the person doing the cheating. The number one source of support for the person who was cheated on is the person who did the cheating. How has our species has evolved to this point, right? How are we even still alive as a species? Because it's so broken, but that's still true. When there has been a profound rupture in a relationship, all the way to the point of an affair, the person who can engage and help heal the person who was cheated on is the person who did the cheating, and there's likely significant ruptures in that relationship going into that, and therefore the person doing the cheating often needs healing too. And the person who's their greatest source of comfort is the person they just devastated with the betrayal. And so I just want to highlight that. You may be complaining that your partner, or your child, or a friend has this very avoidant style. But look at what we're asking them to do. Okay? I'm not saying it's not important. It's extremely important. At the same time, though, it doesn't make it easy. Right? So the disorganized, that's the push me, pull you. Increasing self-awareness, as we've talked about, practicing mindfulness. One of the things we find, and I want to highlight this one, is disputing negative beliefs. Okay, you remember your cognitive psychology class? One of the styles of thinking that predicts anxiety and depression to the highest degree is a style of thinking called dichotomous thinking. Either or, good, bad, right, wrong, you're with me, you're against me, we're either together or we're broken up, that there are these very dichotomous ways of thinking, and those predict a lot of distress. And so one of the things that we get to help people practice is finding out what the negative beliefs are. The negative beliefs are often dichotomous beliefs. I'm all bad, you're all good. Oh, you screwed up, now I'm all good and you're all bad, right? Calling that out and helping people practice non-dichotomous thinking. So dichotomous thinking is divergent thinking, either or. Right? Non-dichotomous thinking is convergent thinking. You're bad, but instead I feel hurt that we had arranged for a date night and that you went out with your friends instead. I appreciate you miss your friends, but at the same time, though, it did hurt my feelings when you went out with them and canceled our date, right? So can we talk about this and maybe schedule a date for another day? That's convergent thinking rather than divergent thinking. And it's hard to do because divergent thinking, dichotomous thinking, is so quick and easy. Convergent thinking is what am I going through in my context, what are they going through in their context, trying to understand both of those in the context of the relationship. You know how complicated that just got? It's a skill to develop, and it's not an easy skill to develop. It's still an important one. So develop coping skills, we've talked about that. Vulnerability, build healthy trust slowly, that we appreciate that trust takes time and takes effort and takes practice. And then engage in self-reflective practices. We find disproportionately with those who are living in a disorganized dynamic it's important for most people to journal regularly, just sit back and reflect on their day. But it's disproportionately important for people living this particular relationship style. What am I feeling? What can I take accountability for? What isn't my fault or my responsibility? How am I going to try things differently tomorrow? Who do I need to ask for help? Kind of journaling those things out every night can really help mitigate some of these disorganized dynamics. So there are other self-reflective practices, prayer, meditation, things like that. There's various ways to teach those skills as well, where somebody can really highlight themselves and what's going on with them. Okay, so I'm kind of gutted to say I should have had 2 books on here today. I've got a book coming out to support the podcast called Deep Lore of the Mind. We had a pretty significant family disruption, so it was not published. Hopefully it will be next month. But we do have a podcast now, my daughter Diamelin and I, called Deep Lore of the Mind, and we talk about these big ideas, the fundamental assumptions behind what we usually think and feel. So the deep lore behind the surface.